Dr. Ninja Turtle. I am going to start the poll now, which I forgot last week. That was my fail last week. And so um, we're going to talk today about one, celebrating failure, and two, answering questions that I had in a community post where different subscribers asked questions. And so I'm going to try and do that more and more so that I'm bringing the content that you want to see. And so some of the questions that were asked, I can't answer because I'm not real big in the stock market. And Lisa J. Stocks, who has a live going on as soon as my live finishes, so then I'll be jumping into her live, she deals with the stock market, hence the name Lisa J. Stocks. So she can better answer some of these questions about the stock market more than I can. I have a very small portfolio. And so, oh, good morning, Julie. Both Julies. So I've got Julie Jordan Scott and Julie from Happy on Monday, retirement. And so, and Simply Debbie Sue and Mrs. Paula is here. So I'm saying hi to everyone. I typed hello to certain people before the live started. And so now I'm saying it sort of publicly, that I'm glad you're all here. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to go through and answer some of the subscriber questions that they wanted me to talk about first before I launch into my celebrating failure. Because I will tell you guys, when we're going to talk about this more later in the live, but the IRS is knocking on my door. So we'll talk about that more later. So I'm good. I'm glad everybody is a mod. So in case somebody starts acting up, you guys can take care of them because I'm staring at the monitor. I am going to real quick try this because I practiced it just before the live happened. Nope. I hit the wrong. I hit the wrong button. Oh boy. Now I'm stuck because I hit the wrong button. See, this is why I don't do stuff when I'm live. I don't know how to get back to seeing myself or seeing the comments on my screen. Okay, choose a sticker. We tried that. Okay, and now I'm trying to figure out how to get back. Okay, I got back to myself, so I hit the wrong button. Okay, we're trying this one more time here, everyone. I did this before my live, so I know I can do this. Excuse me while I practice what I'm trying to do. So this is my green screen that I said, I took a photo and I said, I am going to use a background that I like as a green screen. And because I'm going to be traveling for the next 3 weeks. So this is my last live at home. So hopefully you will see this green screen. I'll try and get it more in the frame, try and get the whole picture in the frame for my next green screen. But when I'm sitting in a hotel room, I will probably use this as my background green screen. And so luckily I went someplace and took this picture yesterday so that I would have it here. CL's here. Hi, CL. How are you? Thank you so much for coming. And so far in the poll, it is showing 75% of the people are saying rather than get into real estate, you should get into the stock market first. And I don't happen to ascribe to that because I'm a real estate investor. And the difference between real estate, now I'm not telling you what to do, I'm only telling you my thinking. And that's what my channel is all about. It's what I do and my thinking and my growth in life. Excuse me. So with real estate, the difference between stock and real estate is with stock, in order for you to invest in it, you have to buy it. No one is going to loan you 85% of the cost of your stock. Whether you buy $5 worth of stock like Lisa J. Stocks talks about fractional shares in apps like Robinhood and those kinds of things. Or if you go into something like what I use, which is Vanguard. Am I back? Am I back? I am back. I lost the live stream for a little bit and it came back. So that was disappointing. I don't know if it's because of my green screen or I don't know. But we're going to keep going because I almost canceled this live. I was about to stop it and start it again. I don't normally drop off like that because I'm on the Wi-Fi, so it shouldn't drop off. So let's get back to this real quick. So the difference for me with real estate is a bank will loan me up to 85% of the cost of real estate. So I'm putting 15% down, but I control what happens and I get the gains, the appreciation, income, tax write-offs of 100%. So 15% investment, 100% control. That's for me. I'm not saying anybody should do that. If people want to invest in the stock market, that's totally fabulous. A lot of people, what they do in their retirement is they live off of dividends. And dividends, if you have a ton of money, you have to have a lot of money to get a fair amount of dividends. But it's basically like a pension if you have a ton of money in the stock market. And just to take a little side trip there, I have a calculator that calculates the value, the total value of my pension and the total value of my Social Security. So those two things together are valued at over $1 million. So if I had that money in the stock market, it would pay me what my Social Security and my pension pay me every month. So pensions and Social Security do have value. A lot of people do not put them on their net worth statement. I do, because they actually have value, because they're income. Thank you, Keisha. Yeah, I took this at a place that I visit here in my town, and so I really like it. I really like it. And I use it on my Zoom when I'm on Zoom meetings. So anyway, I'm going to get into this because I've already lost my live once, and I don't want to lose this again. So we're going to get into the different things that people have asked me within, my subscribers. One of the things that somebody asked was what led me to become homeless, because I talk about being homeless and I sort of start my story there. And without getting into too much detail because of my own privacy reasons, I will tell you that I made a lot of very poor decisions. A lot of them were financial, which, possibly leads to why I have a, financial literacy channel. I never filed income taxes. I paid child support every other month because of my lifestyle. And all of these things sort of closed in on me. And what happened was I ended up saying, that's it, I'm all done. I can't figure out this life thing. I kept getting fired from jobs, right? And so what happened to me was that I ended up becoming homeless because of my own poor decisions. No one taught me how to be a responsible adult. So therefore, I kept making bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, which was worse and worse. My solution was always worse than the problem. And so I ended up at a homeless shelter after being in a psych unit for 3 days. I've never been in a psych unit after that. However, I was in a psych unit, and then I went from there to a homeless shelter. And I asked myself, why at 25 years old am I sitting in a homeless shelter when people always said he has so much potential? Well, one bad decision after another bad decision, that's how I ended up in a homeless shelter. And so I just wanted to throw that out there because somebody asked me to talk about that. And that's sort of how it happened. But sitting there with no more than $2 to my name, I said, I am going to do something different. Now, did I do something different immediately upon leaving the homeless shelter? No. It took me a few months to start to change my life and start to make better decisions. And then I started learning from others how to be an adult. And I have to tell you, adulting is overrated. Okay, now that I'm retired, right? Adulting, it's overrated. So, um, one of the things that has helped me over all these years, and it's been over 38 years since I was sitting in that homeless shelter, is if you look at my thumbnail for this particular live, you'll see an eye that has a dollar sign in it. And that was my focus. Coming out of the homeless shelter, one, I had to start paying taxes. The IRS wanted their money. The child support court said, if you don't make a payment out of your next paycheck, you're going to jail. And I've never been in jail. So I was taught how to get a money order and make payments to the child support court to get caught up. And it took me 3 or 4 years to catch up on all my back payments, and I was never late again. Was never late again. But that's not to say that I was always perfect with paying child support. So what happened was, just like the photo in the thumbnail, I focused on my finances coming out of the homeless shelter. And so, excuse me while I look over at my video on the thing, which I shouldn't be doing. I should be focusing on the camera. But, oh, hi, Lala. Lala, the high vibe coach, is here. And Q at 60 plus and Sophie is here. So 60 plus and Sophie Q. She has a walk 1 mile a day in April challenge. And a lot of us YouTubers have joined her challenge. Now, this is day 3, and I have not walked yet today because in the mornings I get ready for my live. But I will walk my mile after, and I'm amazed that I went out and walked my mile yesterday. So I did it. I've done it 2 days in a row, and I'm determined to have better health. So we'll get back to my sort of story here, and then we're going to get into these questions because I want to get off of my story. I really do. So I focused on my finances because I was forced to by the IRS and by the child support people. So I have been focused on my finances for 38 years. And so as we get into this live more, you'll see I'm not perfect with my finances, even after 38 years. I don't think anybody is expected to be perfect. That's just too high of a standard. I do the best I can do, and I don't compare what I do to what somebody else does. Maybe they're better at real estate or they're better in the stock market at picking stocks than I am. That's okay. I say do the best you can do. That's my philosophy on life. So that's enough about my story. That's how I became focused on my money, was when the IRS came in and the child support people came in. And the other part to that was I was 3 months behind in my rent. Yeah, so I had a 3-day eviction notice on my door. All of these items made me focus on my finances. And so I have never looked back. And I've always stayed focused on improving my finances. But that's where I started. So 3-day eviction notice, child support court saying you're going to jail if you don't make a payment, and the IRS just coming in and taking money from my paycheck. They didn't ask, they just said, we want ours. And so that will lead what we're going to talk about towards the end of the live, which is the IRS and this being tax season. So before I start answering questions, I'm looking for my mouse thing here. There we go. Okay. I have a haiku for everyone. Money questions rise from struggle to steady growth. Answers build your path. So there we have our haiku for the morning. Now let's get into some of the questions that people have asked. So I'm glad that everybody is here. And if you can join that 1 mile a day, get your health better, because health is wealth, right? That's a saying here on this channel. Health is wealth. So one of the first questions after the question about my history and how I became homeless um, is for a beginner in real estate, right? How would someone begin if they have, let's say, a trepidation or an aversion? Because you want to be safe. You don't want to just go in all in and lose all your money, especially if your retirement money is what you have to work with. And us on a fixed income like me, we don't have a lot, to that we can afford to be blowing there. So, um, so there are some different income type investments which merge not only either real estate or real estate and the stock market. So what I did, and what a lot of real estate people do to get started, is house hacking. And that's where you share your space or some space that you live in, because it can look all different ways. What I did, my first house hack, was I built myself a little apartment in the basement of a house, and I rented out the whole top floor, which was a 3-bedroom house. So I rented out the top part of the house. I lived in the basement. I had a separate door to exit. I put myself a washing machine and a dryer down in my little bathroom that I had built into the basement. And this was in Vermont. And so I did this for 2 years. I lived rent free, mortgage free for 2 years and banked all that money. When you live for free, that's one way to get into real estate. And trust me, you'll get hooked if you're living for free. Now, then what I did was I sold that house. And because I had it for over 2 years, I didn't have to pay any capital gains taxes on it. So I got to keep all the profit. And I used that money to buy a duplex where I lived on one side and I had a renter living on the other side. Now, that duplex was very cheap. It was very old in Vermont, and it needed a lot of fixing up. So when you're starting in real estate, sometimes you have to start with a fixer-upper and just take your time to add value to that property. But again, the bank is loaning you 75 or 85% of that purchase. So you don't have to have 100,000, 200,000, sometimes in a lot of places, 500,000 or $1 million in cash to buy a house. Whereas if you wanted $1 million in stock, you need to have $1 million to buy the stock. So that's the difference for me, is I started slow and I worked my way up. And so that's one way to get started if you're averse, is house hacking. Because even if you have a roommate, that's house hacking. I'm not real big on sharing my kitchen, but some people can share a kitchen and share a bathroom and have a roommate. And just doing that, even if it's an apartment and not a house that you own, real estate that you own, if you can cut your expenses in an apartment so that you can save up the down payment to get a rental property and then get roommates. I have a friend on YouTube, and what she does was she was a single female, so she only rented to other single women and had roommates. And then she would move out, buy another property, and rent the room that she was living in the prior property. So let's say it was a 3-bedroom or whatever. She had 3 people living there sharing that property, and she went out, bought another property, and got roommates again. And so she has 3 paid off rental properties. Doesn't owe anything on the mortgage, because all of these other roommates, which are all single women, were helping her pay this off. And that's one of the benefits of having rental properties, is other people are helping you pay off your debt. That just, and I'm not trying to put down the stock market, because what I'm going to say is that if you want to mix real estate and the stock market, you can do that by buying into REITs, right? Which is a real estate investment trust. You can buy into a stock that owns real estate. So you're not dealing with tenants, you're not dealing with toilets. That's one of the things that people don't like about real estate. I have property managers, and so some of the upcoming questions I sort of can't answer because I have learned that I am not a good real estate manager. I can own real estate, I can't manage it. And so you have to know what it is you're willing and not willing to deal with in real estate. And if you really don't want to own any properties, let's say for insurance reasons, then you could buy real estate via the stock market. There's a website called Fundrise where you can invest in real estate that they own and they manage. Now, your money's locked up for a time. You can't get your money back, or if you want it back, there's penalties. So I'm not saying that people should invest in that. But what I'm saying is there are ways to invest in real estate without actually owning real estate. So all of these things you have to figure out what you're comfortable with. And none of these things would I sink half of my retirement income into. I dip my toe in the water. And then last thing I'm going to share on this just popped into my head. If you are an accredited investor, which I am, right, there are requirements for income or net worth to become an accredited investor. Then you can invest in real estate via syndications, where you loan money to other people to buy real estate. I did that. The people that I invested with, I lost my money. I made some money, but then they started losing money. I'm not doing that anymore. Some people, I have friends who are making money in syndications. They're getting a check every single month. So it does work. It just did not work for me. So I don't want to put down syndications. So what I'm saying is learn what works for you, right? I don't do short-term rentals. I don't do mid-term rentals. Those are much more profitable than my long-term boring rentals. I am comfortable with my long-term boring rentals. And so I need to, okay, I'm checking the clock here. I'm checking the clock because I don't want to stay on this topic way too long. But these are ways that someone who may have a fear of getting involved in real estate could dip their toe in the water to a level that they're comfortable. And some people are handyman or handy women, right? We'll take Keisha, for example. She's a homesteader and she can do amazing things with power tools in her hands, and she can build stuff. Well, then you could start in real estate if that's your thing. I'm not a handy person, right? I can paint, I can do some electrical, I can do some plumbing. I've learned a few things, but I'm not going to be up on a roof trying to replace a roof. Not going to be doing it. So let's move on to the next question so that we try to get through these. So you have to ask yourself, would you rather own the real estate and control whether you buy it, sell it, go through a 1031 exchange, or do you just want passive income? Syndications, passive income. And it was passive until I didn't get any more income from the people I loaned my money to. So if you invest in a REIT, that's passive income. But again, you're not in control of the asset. I like being in control of the asset. And so when you're doing this, you have to look at how does this fit into your plan for your life and your future. If you want to travel, you don't want to be getting calls, because I have gotten calls at the airport from a renter when I'm getting ready to get on an airplane to travel somewhere. So if you don't want those calls, you may want more passive income if travel is going to be in your future. And so I'm traveling for 3 weeks in April. So, I'll just be in a hotel for the next 3 weeks. So that's all. You know me, I'll still be live on Fridays. And so you may want to invest in the stock market. If you have a real fear and aversion to owning real estate, then you may want, or if you live in a high cost of living area. Not everybody lives in a low cost of living area like me. So my point is, there are a ton of ways that you can invest in real estate, but instead of saying I can't, you have to ask yourself, how can I? That's the key to being successful in any real estate transaction, because everything looks daunting. I bought an 8 unit one time, and I said, there's a lot of repairs that need to go in to fix this up. But the question was, how can I? Well, let's see. I have income coming in from over here. I have income coming in from over here. Well, if things go haywire, I have an emergency break glass fund over here. See, so I'm not just putting all my money out there and hoping and praying that this works. So you have to have a plan, and it has to fit your future. My real estate plan is to pay all these properties off and just live off the income and travel. That's it. And let my property management company handle it. So have a plan if you're going to get into real estate. Have an end game. I had to be taught you always have an end game, and I didn't have an end game. I was just accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And so today I have an end game. So one of the questions that someone asked, because I'm trying to move on from that, is tenant screening, right? How do you screen your tenants? When I was the property manager of my duplex in Vermont, I was horrible at tenant screening because I moved from Vermont to Miami. So I'm trying to manage a property in Vermont from Miami, Florida. Then I moved to Maryland from Miami, and now I'm trying to manage a property in Vermont from Maryland. And my tenant screening was absolutely horrid. So I eventually found someone in that tiny town that would manage my one rental property. And that's the hard part, is finding a property manager in a very small town. And I lived in Virgins, Vermont, which is 1 mile square, and it claims it's the smallest city in America. So if you want to look that up, Virgins, Vermont. And so I'm just looking over to see Lala, the high vibe coach. Oh, Tumbleweeds is here. Hi, Tumbleweeds. Thank you both for being here. And so Lala, the high vibe coach, says passive income. And, I was just looking and picking up some pictures last night off of my Adobe Express, which is part of my Adobe suite, right? So now I can get some free photos. But it was mailbox money. And that's where I'm headed. I am headed for passive income and mailbox money. And I know a lot of people want that. And dividends in the stock market are passive income and mailbox money. However, you don't get mailbox money just off the beginning. It takes years and years and years of very safe investing to get mailbox money. Now, of course, some people say, oh, well, just, YOLO it all and go into crypto. Well, I lost my money over there too. I don't invest in anything that I don't understand. That's what Warren Buffett said. I believed it, and that's what I do. All of my stock that I have in my brokerage account, which isn't a lot, very tiny, are things I believe in, things I understand. I did try to invest in some stuff that a friend recommended, lost my money. So I know, for me, I don't invest in things I don't understand. So I can't tell anybody else what to do, but I know where I've lost my money. And so we don't want to do that anymore. I'm getting too old to be losing money. So tenant screening. My property managers today handle my tenant screening. Now, if you default, if I have to evict you from one of my properties, and my property managers handle that, pay the lawyers, I got to pay them eventually, but they handle all that. You cannot rent from my property management company in all their units ever again until you pay me back whatever you owed me and I had to evict you for. So a lot of people where I live do not default on their rent. They don't get evicted because they know that locks them out of every rental that property management company handles. So I have very low vacancies. I have very low evictions. I didn't lose any money during COVID. None of my renters didn't pay during COVID. Like what happened in California where people weren't paying for 10 months and they couldn't be evicted. I didn't have any of that. Now, granted, I have working class people who are just hardworking Americans, just want to go to work every day. They don't want to not pay their rent. That's just not the place where I live. So, property inspections. I am going to say, and this may sound bad, so everybody sit down. I am going to say I have no idea, right? I know that when my rentals need repairs, that they get repaired because we have like a maintenance part of my property management company. But I do not know, nor do I micromanage my property management company. I call them when I have a question, and they email me when a tenant isn't paying, or they email me if some major repair needs to be done. Like, for example, in January, we had a lot of freezing down here in Alabama, and pipes broke underneath the ground. Well, now we've got my AC going, which I should have turned that off before. Give me 2 seconds. Let me see. We're at 32 minutes. I'm going to go turn this off. Okay, you are not supposed to get up in the middle of a live, but I did. So the AC should turn itself off, which it did. So property inspections. I don't know how often my property management company inspects properties, but I do know that they are on top of anything that needs to be done. Like the broken pipes that happened. That was just an emergency, because our area is not used to freezing temperatures. And so it was freezing for a week. And that just broke some pipes underneath the houses. And so these are things that are going to come up. So you need to have an emergency reserve or some access to liquidity. Doesn't have to be cash, but some access to liquidity in case of emergencies. I have my teaching income to cover emergencies. I also have lines of credit to cover emergencies. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So that was the property inspections. And also within the leases, it says things like you can't have dangerous dogs. So I sort of reduce my liability, my insurance liability with the leases. But again, all of that is handled by the property management company. And I do this specifically so that I can travel. I don't get phone calls saying, oh, well, the toilet's broken. No, they just send someone over, they fix it, and I get billed for it. So that's less income from my income each month. Plus, I pay, let me explain this. Typically, and this is just typically, you would pay a property manager 10%. And I'm sorry for all my coughing. I don't know what's going on with my throat today. But you would pay a property manager 10% of your rent to manage your rentals. Sometimes they may charge like 50% of a month's rent or even a month's rent to get your property rented. My property manager doesn't do that. If my property is empty, they don't get paid because they get paid a percentage of the rent. This is an incentive for them to keep me fully occupied so that they get their 10%. Actually, I pay a little bit less. I did pay 10%, but as I accumulated more properties, they cut me a break, so I pay less than 10%. So that's a beautiful thing. I get to bring home more of my money. But that's something you give up with property management if you want the freedom to travel like I do in retirement. And so yeah, I have no idea on the yearly inspections. Um, so let's talk about the stock market because there were questions here about the stock market. Now, first of all, I know I'm not an expert on the stock market. Lisa J. Stocks is, and her live will be just after this. So look her up. Um, but the question was, excuse me again. Boy, I don't know what's going on with my throat this morning. This is today. The S&P 500. I believe in simplicity, but I follow Warren Buffett. And what he talks about is have a broad index fund with very low fees and let it ride.